Release family guilt and ancestral expectations. Zen wisdom for deep sleep. You are lying awake right now carrying the suffocating, heavy weight of an unspoken family debt, replaying a parent's disappointed sigh, or a silent expectation that has haunted your choices for years. Maybe you spent moments today feeling like a quiet failure, torn between the authentic shape of your own life and the unlived dreams of those who raised you, fearing that choosing your own truth makes you an ungrateful child. The atmosphere surrounding your bed tonight is damp, cool, and deeply grounding. The subtle, rustic aromas of crushed plum leaves, damp peat soil, cedar wood smoke, and cold autumn rain drift softly through the room, while the firm mattress supports your weary spine, offering a quiet, sheltered orchard hut that asks no sacrificial bending from your soul. Dear friend, this painful ache of filial guilt does not mean you are a cold or selfish human being, nor does it mean you have betrayed those who gave you life. You are merely like a young wild plum tree planted on a high terrace, struggling under heavy lead weights tied to your branches by a grower who feared your natural upward reach. You are not broken because your branches refuse to grow along an artificial wire frame. Nothing tonight will force you to break your natural wood grain, and no voice in this quiet space expects you to snap your own spirit just to prove your devotion. Right now, you are gently invited to untie the frayed cords in your mind, allowing your natural sap to flow freely down into the deep, quiet earth of your present life. A surprising, deeply liberating truth emerges from ancient Buddhist reflection when we face the burden of inherited expectations. We often believe that true filial honor requires us to bend our lives into the exact shape our ancestors envisioned, treating their unfulfilled wishes as unpayable debts written into our bones. Yet contemplative wisdom reveals that family expectations are rarely divine blueprints. They are protective projections born from ancestral hardship, fear, and cold seasons. A wild mountain plum tree does not honor its origin by forcing its wood to grow horizontally until it splits under the winter frost. It honors the soil beneath it by growing straight, catching the autumn light, and bearing sweet fruit in its own natural shape. True devotion to your origins is not self-destruction. It is the quiet courage to bloom in your authentic form. The panicked mind mistakenly insists that releasing your family's expectations is an act of cruel abandonment. It endlessly replays unspoken guilt, attempting to force your life into an inherited mold, convincing you that living authentically will leave you completely isolated in the cold. But a high terraced orchard overlooking a misted valley does not scold a wild plum sapling for reaching toward its own sky. It simply holds the deep peat soil firmly around its roots, trusting that the tree knows how to weather the mountain wind without losing its foundation. Think of how much vital energy you have burned by trying to tie lead weights to your own spirit in the dark. Maybe you have felt this too, lying awake with a tight contraction in your throat, dreading the next family dinner or phone call, feeling like an imposter who has stolen a life that belongs to someone else. Trying to repay an emotional debt by forcing your wood to grow against its natural grain only leaves your branches cracked and your heart hollow. What if, for these quiet hours, we lay down the lead weights and the heavy hemp cords? What if we permit your heart to rest like an unbent plum tree rooted in deep, dark soil tonight? Let the small, guarded muscles around your eyes, forehead, and jaw soften completely. Release the tight, protective grip you have been holding in your neck, your shoulders, and your stomach. Feel the broad, unyielding support beneath your body, carrying the full weight of your bones without demanding that you bend your life for anyone tonight. Listen to the long, quiet cadence of your breath moving through your chest, slow, smooth, and completely unhurried in the darkness. There is no family trial you must answer to right now. Let your breath move like a cool autumn breeze drifting through wild plum leaves, steady, soft, and entirely free. Perhaps you learned early in life to measure your worth through the relief on a parent's face, building a habit of intense self-sacrifice whenever your own desires cross their plans. In the tradition of Zen wisdom, we do not view your filial guilt as a shameful flaw that must be eradicated. It is seen as a misdirected expression of love, a deep desire for connection that has simply lost its natural balance. You do not need to shatter your authentic self to prove that you care. You need only to permit your roots to drink quietly from the present ground, so that every breath you draw becomes a gentle act of trust in your own rightful growth. In a short while, we will travel to a terraced mountain orchard misted by cold rain, where a young fruit grower weeps beside a plum branch that snapped under heavy lead weights. But right now, let your physical frame yield to the simple, unconditional security of this quiet room. The walls around you are thick, keeping out the cold alpine draft, and the dark air here is a calm, neutral shelter that permits your tired mind to drop its heavy burdens. You do not have to pay off an ancestral debt, justify your career, or fix your family's happiness before morning arrives. Your true life was never meant to be a continuation of another person's unlived story. You were born like a wild plum seed planted in rich, dark soil, fully equipped with the inner intelligence needed to branch outward, bear your own fruit, and endure through every shift of the seasons. Let the tight contraction around your throat melt away entirely. Let your hands uncurl slowly upon the sheets, your fingers soft and open, like quiet roots resting in warm, damp earth. There is no debt collector waiting in this dark room tonight, no lead harness you must wear, and no family expectation heavy enough to snap the deep root of your presence right now. You have reached the end of the day's heavy strain, and your present soil is completely rich enough to carry your rest. As we move deeper into the quiet night ahead, remember that your true nature is like a wild plum tree growing on a high mountain terrace. It does not lose its connection to the earth simply because its top branches reach toward a new horizon. The silent disappointments of others can drift past your mind, leaving your central trunk grounded, whole, and profoundly safe in the quiet dark. Let the tired muscles around your spine and lower back sink into the darkness. Let your legs grow heavy and motionless upon the bed, your feet loose and completely supported by the mattress. There is no family expectation you must fulfill in this room tonight, no filial guilt you must carry alone, and no heavy cord strong enough to pull your authentic spirit from its soil right now. You are resting inside your own unbent sanctuary, and your present earth is completely calm enough for you to let go. Up on the damp eastern slope of the ridge, where the high terraced plum groves caught the autumn mist, the night air smelled constantly of wet peat soil, crushed plum leaves, cedar wood smoke, and cold autumn rain. Working as a fruit grower on this quiet mountain terrace was a young man named Wren, who carried a heavy, invisible ache locked deep inside his ribs. Having inherited the family orchard after his late father passed away, Wren lived under an unrelenting, suffocating dread of disappointing his lineage. His father had spent 30 years dreaming of an orchard shaped into rigid, horizontal fan patterns, believing that total alignment along wooden frames was the only way to produce legendary fruit. Wren felt that any branch growing toward its own sky was a disgraceful betrayal of his father's memory. This filial panic drove Wren into an exhausting state of late-night labor. Long after the valley workers had gone home to their warm hearths, Wren remained pacing the muddy terraces with a dim oil lantern. In his right hand, he held a specialized tool, a heavy lead-weight harness fitted with several frayed hemp cords that ended in thick lead balls. Every time a young wild plum sapling sent a strong, flexible shoot upward toward the autumn stars, Wren would tie a hemp cord around the young bark and suspend a lead weight from its tip, forcing the branch down onto a rigid cedar trellis. On this freezing autumn night, as a biting wind rattled the orchard netting, Wren's filial panic escalated into sheer desperation. Replaying a memory of his father's stern face, Wren stood beside a particularly vibrant wild plum tree that had sent 3 robust branches high above the trellis line. Terrified that allowing these wild shoots to grow unconstrained would dishonor his family name, he attempted to bend the thickest branch down by force. He tied a double-weighted lead harness to the shoot, pulling the frayed hemp cords tight until his knuckles turned white in the chilly rain. The young wood groaned under the sudden, violent tension. A sickening snap echoed through the quiet orchard as the living branch split along its center, dark purple sap welling up from the raw wound like tears. Wren dropped the lead harness into the cold mud. He fell to his knees beside the ruined branch, his palms caked in wet peat, his shoulders shaking with silent, bitter tears. The cold rain soaked through his linen tunic, but the ice inside his chest felt far colder. In his mind, that broken wood was absolute proof of his unworthiness as a son. He convinced himself that his inability to bend his own nature to match his father's rigid design made him a failure, an ungrateful heir who was destined to destroy everything he had been given. Stepping softly through the misty rows of fruit trees, carrying a small paper lantern, was Sister Mayu, an elder orchard keeper who had tended the mountain terraces through 40 seasons of frost, drought, and bloom. Sister Mayu wore a dark indigo smock over her coarse hemp robes, her silver hair tucked under a straw hat, her face lined like ancient plum bark. She had quietly observed Ren's night labors for weeks, watching the young man exhaust his spirit against the natural intelligence of the trees. Sister Mayu approached the kneeling grower, her wooden clogs sinking softly into the damp peat soil. She did not lecture Ren for breaking the branch, nor did she offer a quick, superficial speech about planting a new tree. Instead, she set her lantern on a dry stone wall, knelt beside Ren in the dark rain, and reached out to touch a nearby wild plum tree that grew naturally out of a steep granite cleft at the edge of the terrace. Sister Mayu asked Ren to bring his lantern closer and look at the wild tree growing from the granite. Ren wiped the rain from his eyes and crawled over to the rock face, holding the dim oil light near the trunk. The wild plum tree had no lead weights hanging from its limbs, and no cedar trellis supported its frame. Its main trunk curved gracefully out of the rock cleft, sending its branches upward and outward in a wide, unforced arch that caught the night wind with effortless strength. Sister Mayu reached out her weathered hand, resting her palm gently against the rough, wet bark of the wild tree. She asked Ren if the living power inside this granite plum tree, its ability to draw deep water from the mountain rock and bear sweet winter fruit, was created by the lead weights tied to its shoots. Sister Mayu then reached down into the mud, picking up the heavy lead harness Ren had dropped. She placed the cold lead weight directly into Ren's open palm, asking him if a father's true wish for his child was to watch the living wood split and bleed in the dark rain. Ren stood frozen in the misty air, holding the heavy lead weight in his hand, feeling the solid, unyielding granite beneath his boots. The aroma of crushed plum leaves and wet peat soil drifted around him, mingling with the calm, steady presence of the elder keeper. A sudden, sharp wave of emotional recognition broke through Ren's chest, loosening the cold knot that had gripped his throat for years. He saw with total, painful clarity how his entire life had been spent hanging lead weights on his own spirit, trying to force his authentic choices into an inherited mold out of sheer terror of being ungrateful. He recognized that his night panic had never brought his father back, nor had it honored the family name. It had only broken his own living branches, leaving his heart cracked and bleeding in the cold rain. While standing in the middle of a fertile terrace, he looked from the lead weight in his hand to the wild tree standing strong against the granite cleft, realizing that his roots were already deep, already nourished by the earth, completely whole, without needing to snap under artificial tension. His body gave a long, shuddering sigh, his tight shoulders dropping away from his ears, his breath expanding into the lower depths of his lungs for the first time in memory. Yet as Sister Mayu took her paper lantern and turned to walk down the misty terrace path toward the temple gates, a quiet, lingering question remained hovering in Ren's tired mind. He had felt the truth of the wild tree and the relief of dropping the lead weight, but he did not yet know how his heart could stop its habit of feeling guilty whenever he stepped onto his own path. The autumn rain continued to fall softly against the plum leaves, and the mountain terrace settled back into its deep, unconstrained silence, holding the wild trees safe inside its dark, rich soil. Ren stood alone on the terrace for a few long moments, feeling the cold rain wash the peat from his palms, wondering how a human spirit could learn to trust the unforced shape of its own growth. This quiet moment beside the granite rock face does not ask you to sever your love for your family, nor does it demand that you become cold and unfeeling toward those who came before you. Deep contemplative wisdom has never been about severing warm human bonds or pretending that ancestral affection does not matter. It does not expect you to face a parent's aging face or a silent family disagreement with icy indifference. Feeling a sharp contraction in your chest when a loved one expresses disappointment or when your choices create tension is a completely natural human response. It is the protective instinct of a loyal heart that wants to maintain harmony with its roots. Experiencing that protective pain simply reveals that your capacity for deep connection is alive and active. When a real family expectation or an unfulfilled parental dream rests between you and those you love, an authentic, unavoidable sadness arises in your life. That initial sorrow carries its own genuine weight, much like a cold autumn rain falling over the high terraces of an orchard. It asks for quiet patience, honest listening, and gentle kindness. Living in a world of interconnected relationships means that perspectives will differ, generations will hold contrasting values, and certain life paths will naturally diverge. Those real, poignant moments ask for your soft presence, step by step, yet observe closely what happens inside your spirit during the dark, late hours when you lie awake replaying every unspoken judgment. This is where the exhausting, crushing weight of filial guilt constructs its heaviest prison. Driven by an ancient fear of being cast out or labeled ungrateful, our mind begins to demand impossible emotional repayment. We force our tired thoughts to loop through endless internal defenses, mentally drafting explanations, hanging heavy lead weights upon our own choices, and scolding ourselves furiously for failing to be the exact person our family envisioned. We take a single difference of opinion in the present and multiply it into a lifetime of imagined betrayal, turning our quiet bed into an exhausting courtroom. This frantic compulsion to tie lead weights to our own natural growth is what ancient wisdom recognizes as the primary source of our deepest spiritual fatigue. In our modern daily lives, this internal strain is not an abstract idea. It is that tight, burning knot in your throat at midnight after a difficult family gathering. It is the overwhelming false conviction that if you stop carrying your parents' unlived dreams right now, you are somehow destroying the very love that gave you life. Consider what actually happens when you force your spirit to bend against its natural grain. The initial conversation or disappointed look was a brief, concrete event in time, asking only for a soft, authentic presence when the sun rises. But by insisting that your life must be broken and reshaped until no individual path remains, your thinking creates an immense secondary agony. The initial disagreement was merely a single falling autumn leaf upon the grass. Your frantic late-night guilt, your racing pulse, and your desperate clutching at the lead-weight harness are the heavy, artificial mud created entirely by your refusal to let your natural branches reach toward the sky. Profound spiritual reflection shows us that most of the suffocating exhaustion you carry tonight does not come from your actual family dynamics. It grows from the unrelenting, guarded demand that you must secure total parental approval before you permit your body to relax. It comes from treating your unique, adult life path as a shameful offense, rather than the natural, open sky toward which every living tree must grow. The shifting opinions of others carry no power to break your core, but standing in the rain furiously tying heavy lead balls to your own branches will always leave your wood split and your spirit bleeding. When we cultivate a soft, unhurried awareness toward our present path, we are not abandoning our parents, nor are we inviting cold conflict into our homes. True spiritual maturity is simply the quiet, brave willingness to let your natural growth be unforced for a few hours. It is the willingness to notice the familiar urge to reach for the lead-weight harness, and to whisper softly to yourself, "My life is a wild tree rooted in deep soil right now. And growing toward my own horizon does not mean I am ungrateful." When you set down the lead weights and allow your attention to settle onto the rich peat earth beneath you, an immense, soothing relief washes through your entire frame. This is the profound comfort of true self-forgiveness made real in your spirit. Self-compassion means recognizing that a wild mountain plum tree reaching naturally toward the autumn sun possesses a timeless dignity that 1,000 forced, broken branches could never create. When you stop fighting your own natural shape, the terrifying, guilt-filled forecasts about your family bonds dissolve, falling away into the dark, quiet earth of your present room. The wild plum tree holds its living capacity faithfully, not because it bent until its trunk snapped, but because its roots remain deep, whole, and completely nourished within the dark rock cleft. A cold wind can blow across the terraces, but the unforced wood sways gently without breaking. In the exact same way, when you stop forcing your life into an inherited mold, your spirit recovers its natural, unshakable foundation. The need to compulsively repay an unpayable debt falls away, leaving a grounded, peaceful presence that knows how to love others while remaining true to itself. This grounded, unforced presence is your true, enduring sanctuary. It was never created by total parental praise, nor was it diminished when someone questioned your life choices. The spacious awareness inside you that observes your family guilt is completely untouched by the expectations themselves. It remains deep, quiet, and steady, like the rich mountain granite resting undisturbed beneath an autumn night. Offering soft reverence to your present, authentic path is not a selfish act of rebellion. True honor to your lineage is simply the willingness to inhabit the solid earth of this present hour, trusting that the living, adaptive tree within your core knows how to bear its own sweet fruit as the seasons turn. It is the quiet courage to say, "My life has grown from deep roots, and I will let my branches reach toward my own sky tonight." Slowly, a deep restorative understanding settles into your bones. You begin to see that dropping your inherited guilt is not an act of betrayal. It is the natural, noble return of a soul coming home to its own sacred soil. Surrendering the exhausting struggle to live another person's story is not a defeat. It is the quiet doorway to discovering the timeless freedom that has always lived within your unbroken heart. As you lie here in the soft shelter of your bed, feeling the broad mattress holding your spine, you can feel how close this inner ease really is. It does not require you to change your family's mind overnight, nor does it demand that you resolve every ancestral expectation before you are allowed to sleep. It requires only a soft moment of permission, a gentle loosening of your tight throat, allowing your spirit to settle into the deep, quiet earth of this hour under a quiet, starry sky. In a short while, we will practice a very simple way of feeling this wild plum tree within your own physical frame. But even right now, as you listen to these gentle words, notice how your lungs expand and release without asking for anyone's permission. Your breath moves softly through the dark, supported by the calm air of the room. Steady, quiet, and completely safe, exactly as you are. Now, if it feels comfortable for your physical body in this quiet space, permit your frame to yield gently into the bed beneath you. There is no rigid alignment you must force, and no correct posture you need to maintain tonight. You might let your arms rest loosely along your sides, or perhaps place one soft hand over your lower abdomen, wherever your shoulders feel most unburdened. If your eyes are still hovering open, perhaps you can let your eyelids drift shut, inviting the cool dark to envelop your vision. Nothing in this orchard-scented room is asking you to bend your life, repay an ancestral debt, or justify your path to anyone. Draw a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, letting the cool air expand your lower ribs, and then release it softly through your mouth, letting your spine sink into the mattress like damp peat soil settling around a deep root. You do not need to count your inhalations or regulate their cadence. Simply permit your chest to rise and fall the way a quiet autumn breeze whispers through wild plum leaves, steady, unforced, and completely at ease with every quiet exhale. Perhaps you can feel a subtle loosening in the strained muscles around your throat, your jaw, your temples, and the back of your neck. If a tight contraction of filial guilt or family anxiety remains locked in your chest, that is completely fine as well. You do not need to push that tension away or force your heart to feel free. Even noticing that old urge to tie lead weights to your choices without judging yourself is a moment of deep, gentle restoration. As you rest here in the cool darkness, allow your attention to turn softly toward one specific family expectation that has been weighing on your mind tonight. It might be a parent's unfulfilled dream, a subtle comment about your career, or a persistent fear that living your true path makes you a disappointment. Do not try to solve that relational puzzle right now, and do not attempt to force a complete reconciliation before morning comes. Simply let that family worry sit quietly in the dark space of your awareness, like a heavy lead weight resting in the grass. Perhaps you can give a very soft, silent name to what your spirit is experiencing. You might whisper to yourself, "This is the ache of inherited guilt," or perhaps, "This is my mind trying to bend my wood to please others." By naming this internal pattern with a gentle, forgiving voice, you step back from the edge of panic. You begin to observe the old habit of self-sacrifice without letting it snap your natural growth. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind's eye the image of your own spine as a resilient, wild plum trunk rooted deep in rich, dark mountain earth. Picture its smooth, firm bark, its steady sap flowing upward, and its broad branches reaching naturally toward the open sky. Smell the surrounding atmosphere of wet peat soil, crushed plum leaves, cedar wood smoke, and cold rain drifting through the night air. Imagine taking that heavy, exhausting lead-weight harness with its frayed hemp cords, which you have been carrying out of fear of disappoint, and placing it gently inside a small woven fruit basket sitting on the wet stone wall beside your tree. You do not need to kick the basket away with anger, nor do you need to snap the cords with violence. You simply place your inherited obligations, your family guilt, and your fear of judgment inside the woven reed basket, setting it safely down upon the damp earth. Watch what happens in your imagination when the lead harness is set aside and the heavy cords fall away from your limbs. Picture your wild plum branches swaying softly in the night wind, completely unconstrained, yielding gracefully to the cold breeze without breaking or splitting. You do not need to force your branches to blossom instantly, nor do you need to prove how sweet your fruit will be. You simply watch your natural wood standing tall in the quiet mountain mist, whole, unbent, and deeply nourished by the rich soil beneath your roots. Notice how the cold autumn rain falls softly over the terrace slope, touching the wild plum leaves without any resistance. The rain does not break the tree. It simply soaks into the dark earth around the trunk, feeding the deep roots that anchor you firmly to the mountain. If your mind strays back into its old habit of replaying family conversations or trying to draft defensive explanations for your life choices, there is no need to feel disappointed in yourself. Your mind has been trying to protect your family connection for a very long time. And old habits of filial anxiety do not vanish in a single night. Whenever you catch yourself reaching for the lead-weight harness again, simply notice that movement with a soft, forgiving heart. You can quietly say to yourself, "My mind is trying to tie lead to my branches again." And then imagine letting your gaze return to that wild plum tree standing free in the quiet orchard once more. You can return to this quiet, unbent root whenever you are ready, as many times as you need tonight. There is no ancestral exam you must pass before you are permitted to fall asleep. You do not need to resolve the story of your family lineage, nor do you need to demonstrate that your choices are correct before dawn arrives. Healing your relationship with your origins is not a sudden event where all family tension vanishes forever. It is a series of quiet, hidden moments where you choose to untie the lead weights and permit your living wood to reach toward its own sky. Even a single breath spent honoring your natural growth permits your nervous system to taste the deep peace that lives beyond inherited guilt. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest, continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. The solid weight of your head, your shoulders, and your legs is completely supported by the bed beneath you. You do not need to bend your life tonight. You do not need to prove your loyalty to anyone. The mattress is holding you. The room is enclosing you, and the deep, rich soil of this present hour is completely broad enough to carry your rest. In a short while, we will travel deeper into the temple root cellar, where a master gardener shows how wild rootstock and cultivated signs find harmony without erasing the ancient strength of the root. But for now, allow yourself to remain right here in your bed. Let the cool, unbent trunk of the wild plum tree rest quietly behind your eyes. Let your throat remain loose and your hands soft upon the sheets, knowing that nothing needs to be forced, nothing needs to be bent, and that your authentic heart is completely safe enough to rest tonight. Farther down the terraced ridge, where a stone root cellar sat tucked behind the lower temple grounds, the night air smelled of aged cedar, wet loam, dried mountain herbs, and bitter almond resin. Working as an assistant gardener in this quiet earth sanctuary was a young man named Kenji, who suffered under an even deeper, more suffocating conflict regarding his family heritage. Kenji was responsible for grafting cultivated domestic plum shoots onto wild mountain rootstock to build orchard saplings for neighboring villages. His grandfather had been a legendary master gardener who established the temple lineage, and Kenji was terrified that allowing any wild, unruly growth from the underground rootstock would corrupt the refined domestic scion, bringing disgrace upon his family name. This terror of dishonoring his ancestral lineage turned Kenji's daily grafting into an obsessive, anxious battle. Every evening while the lower valley slept, Kenji sat on a low stool in the stone root cellar beside a wooden workbench. In his right hand he held his most prized tool, a carved bone-grafting knife with a cracked boxwood handle that had belonged to his grandfather. Whenever a newly potted sapling sent up a small, vigorous wild shoot from below the graft line, Kenji's chest contracted with intense panic. He viewed those wild underground shoots as dangerous, rebellious defects that threatened to destroy the cultivated scion above. He would take his bone knife and aggressively slice away every wild sprout, gouging deep into the rootstock bark to ensure no wild sap could rise. On a freezing midnight, as a cold drizzle tapped against the cellar door, Kenji's fear of failure reached a breaking point. A batch of young, grafted plum saplings prepared for a prominent mountain estate had begun to wither in their earthen pots. Looking closely in the lantern light, Kenji realized that by repeatedly slicing away every wild shoot and gouging the rootstock bark, he had severed the sap channels beneath the graft. The rootstock was rotting underground, unable to feed the delicate domestic scion above. A sharp wave of horror and self-reproach struck Kenji's throat. He convinced himself that he had destroyed his grandfather's legacy through his own incompetence. Panicked and desperate to fix the damage, he seized a dying sapling and drove the bone knife furiously into the root bark, attempting to carve out the darkened tissue. The wet blade slipped against the slick wood, cutting deep into his left thumb. Kenji dropped the bone knife onto the dirt floor. Blood dripped onto his linen apron, mixing with the damp soil and bitter almond resin on his hands. He sank back against the cold stone cellar wall, cradling his injured hand, his chest heaving with ragged, desperate breaths. He looked at the withered saplings lined up on the bench and felt utterly defeated, trapped in a cold prison of inherited pressure and impossible expectations. He believed he was caught in a hopeless trap, where allowing the wild root to live felt like a betrayal of his ancestors, yet cutting it away killed the very tree he was trying to save. Emerging quietly from the dark inner doorway of the root cellar was Master Haru, an old temple rootender who had spent 50 years working with mountain soils and wild orchards. Master Haru wore a coarse gray smock stained with peat, his shoulders broad and slightly curved, his eyes holding the warm, patient depth of old forest earth. He had quietly observed Kenji's rigid, fearful grafting practices for months, waiting for the young man's desperate battle against the root to reach its natural limit. Master Haru stepped over to the workbench, his soft cloth shoes making no sound against the dirt floor. He did not scold Kenji for cutting his hand, nor did he scold him for the withered saplings. Instead, he set down a small clay basin of warm water, dipped a clean linen cloth into it, and gently washed the blood and dirt from Kenji's thumb, wrapping the wound in a soft bandage of clean cotton and pulverized yarrow leaves. When the wound was bound, Master Haru reached down and picked up the carved bone knife from the dirt floor. He set the knife quietly on the far corner of the bench. Then he reached into a dark wooden crate beneath the table and pulled out a young, unpruned plum sapling that had been growing freely in an open earthen pot. Master Haru set the pot between them under the warm oil lamp. The sapling possessed a cultivated domestic branch at the top, but below the graft line, several wild shoots had sprouted from the mountain rootstock, reaching outward in bold, irregular angles. Yet the entire sapling was vibrant, green, and bursting with living energy, its leaves thick and glossy. Master Haru asked Kenji to place his uninjured hand flat against the side of the clay pot, feeling the cool earth and the living pulse of the sapling within. Kenji rested his palm against the pot, feeling the damp soil holding the firm root system. Master Haru gently explained that the domestic scion above could never bear sweet fruit or survive a harsh mountain winter on its own. It lacked the deep strength needed to pull mineral water from the cold rock. It depended entirely on the wild, untamed energy of the mountain rootstock beneath it. When Kenji tried to slice away every wild shoot out of fear, he was attempting to force the root to deny its own nature. In doing so, he was starving the very life he wished to nourish. Master Haru leaned closer, his voice soft like falling rain. He told Kenji that true honor to his grandfather's memory was not found in murdering the wild root, but in allowing the ancient strength of the mountain earth to support the new growth above. The wild root and the domestic branch were not enemies fighting for dominance. They were two parts of a single, living bridge. Kenji sat in the quiet root cellar, his palm resting against the clay pot, feeling the steady moisture of the soil. The bitter almond scent of the sap mingled with the warm, earthy air of the cellar. A profound wave of quiet realization washed through his body, clearing the panic from his mind like cold spring water flushing away mud. He saw clearly how he had spent years treating his own authentic feelings, his unique desires, and his natural personality as dangerous wild shoots that had to be carved away to please his family memory. He had tried to be a pure, domestic scion without a root, cutting himself so deeply that his spirit had begun to rot from emotional starvation. He looked at the small bone knife sitting on the edge of the bench. He did not throw the knife away, nor did he curse his grandfather's memory. Instead, he reached out with his bandaged hand, picked up the bone knife, and set it carefully inside a wooden tool chest, closing the lid with a soft click. He turned back to the potted sapling. He took one slow, deliberate breath, letting his shoulders drop completely away from his ears. Rather than cutting the wild shoots away, he used his fingers to gently prune only the damaged tips, allowing the wild rootstock to breathe and send its rich sap upward to nourish the whole tree. He chose to sit quietly in the dark cellar with the uncertain future of the orchard, no longer treating his own thoughts of inadequacy as absolute truth, trusting the deep harmony between the wild root and the growing branch. The image of Kenji placing his bone knife inside the tool chest and letting the wild rootstock breathe reveals a profound truth about how our minds manufacture our heaviest emotional burdens. So much of our late-night exhaustion comes from a subtle, deeply ingrained habit of treating our natural growth as a dangerous betrayal. We take an unlived family dream, an unspoken expectation, or an inherited path, and attempt to carve our spirit until it matches an artificial ideal. We convince ourselves that if we just slice away enough of our authentic desires, apologize constantly for being different, or force our choices into a mold built by those who came before us, we can somehow earn the right to belong without experiencing the sharp sting of guilt. This desperate urge to slice away our wild root is often driven by a hidden terror of being deemed ungrateful. When a family expectation presses down upon us, our internal court convenes immediately. We replay old conversations where our choices were questioned, judge ourselves harshly for wanting a different life, and attempt to fix our present fear by dragging a heavy cloud of shame into our room. We begin to view our natural individuality as a disgraceful defect, turning our filial guilt into our very identity. We stop experiencing ourselves as vibrant, living trees rooted in rich soil, and begin viewing our spirit as a broken branch that must be constantly carved, pruned, and punished to prove its loyalty. Yet, this habit of driving a bone knife into your own bark is a form of internal violence that turns the simple reality of human difference into suffocating agony. When you refuse to let your wild rootstock feed your life, you are secretly operating from a mindset of deep self-mistrust. You begin to define yourself through your family's approval alone, turning your guilt into a heavy, suffocating harness that prevents you from tasting the quiet joy of your own path. You stop feeling the cool night air against your face or hearing the soft rain outside, because your entire focus is consumed by the bitter almond resin of your own self-inflicted wounds. Buddhist reflection offers a gentle, illuminating mirror that exposes this subtle trap without any judgment or scolding. It asks us to look closely at the vital distinction between the natural weather life brings and the heavy, extra suffering our own minds construct through resistance, fear, and self-chastisement. Walking through a human life means that loved ones will naturally hold their own perspectives. Generational values will sometimes clash, and moments of relational tension will naturally occur. Those changing circumstances are simple, neutral realities inside an unfolding world. However, the agonizing, sleepless paralysis that keeps your throat tight at midnight is not the disappointed look or the unspoken expectation itself. It is the extra misery created by your decision to hack away at your own roots, blinding your own eyes with fear because you are terrified of growing towards your own sky. It is like a fruit grower who stands in a quiet cellar, and instead of letting the sapling draw water from the soil, furiously carves the rootstock with a bone knife, crying out that his tree is dying. The cold autumn drizzle tapping against the cellar door is the primary reality of the slope. The bleeding thumb, ruined bark, and bitter despair are the secondary suffering created entirely by his refusal to let the root and branch live in peace. Peace does not arrive when you somehow manage to convince every family member to approve of your life choices. Real freedom begins the very second you lay down the bone knife, close the lid of the wooden chest, and allow your bare hands to touch the damp, living soil of your present hour. The unwritten chapters of your adult journey will continue to unfold as they always have. You can offer soft respect to your elders, care for those who raised you, and move with practical kindness. But gouging your own spirit will never make your love any purer. Consider how much of your internal weight comes from attempting to force a wild mountain tree to bear artificial fruit on command. We collapse into late-night panic because we falsely believe that stepping onto our own path is an act of cruel abandonment. But your true nature is not a fragile scion that rots the moment it leaves the trellis. Your awareness is like the vast, fertile mountain slope itself, deep, broad, and patient, holding both the wild root and the cultivated blossom without losing its grounded place in the earth. When you surrender the impossible demand to live another person's story, a massive weight dissolves from your chest. The tight, guarded muscles around your throat and ribs, which have been strained for years to maintain a posture of total compliance, can finally begin to soften. Your lungs find room to draw a long, unhurried breath of cool mountain air. You begin to understand that offering your heart an unbent trunk, allowing your life to draw strength from your own deep soil without being carved by shame, is not an act of selfish rebellion. It is the fundamental foundation of true spiritual peace. You are fully permitted to be a broad, wild plum tree that reaches toward its own horizon, rather than a strained sapling snapping under lead weights for applause. Your value as a living soul was never tied to the total surrender of your authentic desires, or the absolute fulfillment of an author's unlived dream. You were born with an ancient, quiet wisdom, fully equipped to draw water from deep rock, capable of bearing your own sweet fruit in your own season tonight. As you lie here in the dark, feeling the cool air move softly across your skin, notice when your mind attempts to pull you back into its old bone knife habits. It might whisper that you are an ungrateful child for choosing your own career, or that you must compromise your core values to keep the peace. Observe that thought with soft, unhurried presence. You do not need to fight the thought, nor do you need to pick up a single chord for it. You can simply view it as a stray autumn leaf drifting past a cellar window, carrying no power to sever the living root resting deep beneath your bed. This wisdom of untying the lead weights, closing the tool chest on the bone knife, and allowing your wild mountain rootstock to feed your living branches, belongs directly inside the small, demanding moments of your modern routine. It finds its truest purpose during those quiet hours when your mind starts frantically trying to bend your life to satisfy someone else's unlived dream. Consider how easily this habit of carrying inherited guilt shows up on a completely ordinary afternoon. You sit at your kitchen table or walk toward your car, holding a glowing phone in your palm after a tense conversation with a family member. They dropped a subtle hint about your career path, questioned your decision to move, or expressed a quiet disappointment that you have not followed the traditional timeline. A sharp spike of ancestral panic hits your throat. Instead of allowing that silence to remain a simple space between two adults, your mind panics. You immediately start drafting long, defensive text messages in your head, mentally justifying every choice you have made over the last 5 years, desperately trying to prove that you are still a good child, feeling your shoulders lock into a tight, defensive guard long after you put the screen away. In that exact moment, when your phone sits cold on the counter, you are trying to tie heavy lead weights to your own chutes. But wisdom offers you a quiet, spacious choice before you pull the hemp cords tight. You can let your phone rest face down on the table, You can feel the solid floor pressing against the soles of your feet. Take one slow breath into your lower ribs and let the urge to over-explain dissolve into the air. Choosing not to send that frantic defense is how you untie the harness from your wood. It is a brave, quiet decision to let your branches reach toward your own sky, refusing to snap your natural spirit simply because another person cannot see the beauty of your fruit. Or think about those heavy late nights when you carry an exhausting guilt for wanting to rest without having fulfilled every parental expectation first. You lie down after a long, demanding week, feeling a profound weariness in your bones. Yet the moment your head touches the pillow, an internal tribunal begins to audit your life. It compares your achievements to cousins or peers who followed the family mold, scolds you for taking time for yourself, and insists that relaxing without total parental approval is an act of selfish betrayal. You smile politely during family dinners, pretending that everything is fine, while a dark storm of unworthiness churns behind your ribs. When those waves of comparative shame and filial guilt threaten to steal your night, you can choose to stop treating your authentic path as an unforgivable crime. You do not need to prove your loyalty by forcing your trunk onto a cedar trellis. You can allow your awareness to settle like deep loam receiving a cold autumn rain, holding its rich nourishment without apologizing for its depth. Giving yourself full permission to close your eyes, to decline an intrusive demand, or to lie still in the dark without fixing your family's unhappiness is how you permit your living tree to rest upon its natural roots. Notice, too, how often this fear of disappointing others leaks into your relationships and your daily peace. You wait for a text from a friend or partner, and when the response is delayed, your mind immediately assumes you have done something wrong, or that your true self is fundamentally unlikable. You replay recent conversations, analyze subtle shifts in tone, and attempt to control the relationship by overgiving or changing your opinions, treating your connection like a delicate domestic scion that will rot if you do not carve away your wild shoots every hour. Yet the ancient wild plum tree growing from the granite rock face does not earn its right to blossom by apologizing for its height. It anchors its presence firmly in the mountain soil, precisely because its trunk was permitted to curve naturally out of the cleft, yielding gracefully to the alpine breeze without snapping under artificial cords. Peace is not a reward granted only to those who surrender their individuality. Peace is the natural, quiet ground that emerges the moment you stop treating your unique life as a mistake. Giving yourself unconditional permission to lie flat in this dark room tonight, without bending your choices or begging for approval, is how you align your spirit with the deep wisdom of the orchard. Living this path in your modern life does not mean you cut off your family or treat them with cold disrespect. It expresses itself in the softest, most practical pauses of your day. It is taking a gentle breath before reacting with guilt to a manipulative comment. It is choosing to set down your phone when your mind demands you defend your life choices. It is the quiet, steady realization that your heart is not a fragile sapling that will die without total praise, but a resilient, deeply rooted tree that knows how to nourish its own growth. You do not need to resolve every family pattern by tomorrow morning. The Zen path is not about instantly erasing every old habit of filial anxiety that made you reach for the lead weights in the past. It is simply about noticing the moment your fingers tighten around the hemp cords out of panic, and gently choosing to lay the heavy lead in the grass instead. When you practice living as a wild, rooted tree rather than a strained sapling bent along a trellis, your daily life recovers an unshakable dignity. You can offer genuine warmth to your family, speak with gentle clarity, and then return to your authentic path when the sun goes down. You step out of the exhausting role of the perpetual debtor, returning to your true nature as a living bridge between deep soil and open sky. As these late hours settle softly over your room right now, allow these simple truths to cool the remaining friction in your nerves. You have carried enough heavy lead weights through misty groves today. You have carved your own bark enough to satisfy your mind's ancestral fears. The long day of defending your choices, replaying phone calls, and dreading disappointment has fully retreated into the dark. The night has opened a vast, peaceful sanctuary around your bed, offering a shelter where no life needs to be bent. No root needs to be cut, and no child needs to feel ashamed. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. You are completely permitted to set down your lead harnesses and bone knives for the night. You are allowed to let every inherited burden, every comparative worry, and every fear of disapproval dissolve into the wide, dark stillness outside your room. The rich, damp earth beneath your home is holding you, broad and deep, ready to support your entire weight without asking you to break your natural wood tonight. Now, let every lead weight, every frayed hemp cord, and every bone-grafting knife fade quietly into the dark mist of the high mountain slopes. The quiet journeys of Ren untying his wild branches on the rainy terrace, and Kenji setting down his blade in the root cellar have completed their steady work within your spirit. They are no longer distant parables told across a damp orchard, but are soaking down like cold autumn rain sinking into dark peat loam, settling into the subterranean depths of your awareness. The frantic demand to bend your life for an author's dream has stopped. The lead weights rest forgotten in the grass. The stone root cellar is dark and still, leaving your hands soft, cool, and resting unburdened upon the sheets. Your physical body is becoming deeply, delightfully heavy against the steady mattress beneath you. Feel your shoulders, your ribs, and your hips yielding their last subtle guard, sinking half an inch deeper into the soft bedding. Your eyelids feel weighted, smooth, and completely relaxed, as if a gentle mist of damp peat, crushed plum leaves, and cedar wood smoke had brushed over your forehead, clearing away every remaining trace of filial anxiety and ancestral tension. The subtle tightness around your throat, your jaw, and the back of your neck dissolves completely, allowing your airway to open into an easy, spacious passage where cool night air moves softly, carrying no need to justify your existence or defend your authentic path tonight. Every breath you draw now is growing slower, softer, and completely silent. A quiet stream of air enters, lifting your lower ribs like cool mountain mist rising gently over arid slopes, and then glides out like autumn wind passing through unbent plum boughs. Inhale, slow, smooth, and effortless. Exhale, long, quiet, and uncalculated. You are not measuring the length of your branches. You are simply letting your living frame breathe itself, natural, unforced, and completely content upon its present soil. Picture a quiet stone cottage nestled on a high terraced orchard slope at midnight. Outside, a gentle autumn drizzle falls softly over wild plum leaves, carrying the rustic aroma of wet peat, cedar smoke, dried herbs, and bitter almond resin. Deep within the stone shelter, a small oil lamp glows softly in its clay saucer, casting a warm amber light over uncarved cedar beams and cool clay pots. There are no lead harnesses pulling at young shoots, no bone knives cutting into raw bark, and no cold wind strong enough to break the wild roots anchored in the mountain rock. The high terraces rest quiet, steady, and fully enclosed under a vast starry sky, holding every wild tree in dark, unpsant safety. Inside your own chest, that exact same unbent, grounded stillness is quietly resting right now. The sharp, cold panic over disappointed expectations and inherited debt has dissolved into the night air. It has drifted out through the timber rafters, carried away into the vast mountain night where no living tree needs to snap its wood to prove its loyalty. You do not need an unpayable debt cleared to step into tomorrow. You do not need to rewrite your family's history to deserve deep rest. The vast night is broad enough to enclose every generational difference and quiet enough to let your wild root stock nourish your life without making a single apology. Feel the deep heaviness in your thighs, knees, and ankles, melting into the supportive bed beneath you. Feel your feet and toes resting motionless upon the sheets, completely freed from the long days of walking on eggshells and pleading for approval. There are no relational trials you must face in this dark room tonight, no emotional debts you must collect, and no ancestral expectation heavy enough to snap the deep root of your presence right now. You have returned home to the quiet, unbent soil that was always yours. Give your mind total permission to drop its long, exhausting defense over your life. You do not have to solve the puzzle of your family relationships. You do not need to guarantee a harmonious future before morning comes. Those distant conversations belong to the sunrise outside, and you are resting far inside the quiet orchard cottage now. where lead weights hold no purpose and forcing wild wood is no longer required. If a stray thought about a parent's sigh or a silent expectation floats through the dark, let it be like a single falling plum leaf drifting across wet peat earth, touching the ground briefly before dissolving into the soil. You do not need to pick up the harness. You do not need to carve your bark for it. You can simply watch the autumn drizzle touch the wild boughs, leaving your central trunk calm, warm, and completely undisturbed. The night has built a quiet, impenetrable sanctuary around your bed, protecting your emotional weariness from the relentless demands and unlived dreams of the world outside. The morning will arrive in its own time, bringing its own light and its own gentle step to your feet, but tonight belongs entirely to rest. Tonight is a sacred sanctuary where your spirit is permitted to set down its heavy cords, wipe its soil-stained hands, and sink into the rich, unhurried ease of its present authentic path. You are safe here in the quiet dark. Your life knows how to grow without an artificial frame. Your roots know how to draw water from deep rock. Your core spirit knows how to heal when the mind finally stops cutting the bark and lets the living wood breathe in peace. Let yourself sink down through the soft, dark layers of sleep, floating down into the deep, quiet loam where no debt collectors wait, where no branches are forced, and where your true nature rests forever rooted, unbent, and profoundly at peace. When the cold rain waters the mountain slope at midnight, does the wild plum tree ever apologize to the rock for growing toward its own sky? The quiet silence of the terraced orchard deepens into every corner of your dark room, carrying an ancient, untroubled stillness that cradles your frame. In the soft darkness, the wild plum trees resting along the mountain slope do not worry about the cold drizzle gathering on their bark, nor do they panic over the unbent branches reaching into the night sky. They rest quietly in their natural depth, waiting for nothing, demanding no artificial trellis to justify their presence, and needing no lead weights to prove their loyalty to the mountain earth. When you stop treating your unique path like a disgraceful betrayal that must be punished through endless guilt, your mind returns to that same unbothered, ancient innocence. The silent expectations and ancestral fears that weighed on your chest today were not unpayable debts written into your bones. They were simply the protective longings of another generation, leaving your core presence completely untouched, resilient, and whole. Consider how a single wild tree growing from a granite cleft does not stand in opposition to the orchard, nor does it need to force its branches into a domestic shape to honor the soil beneath it. Its living duty is held completely intact within its natural growth, holding its quiet capacity to draw mineral water from the earth and catch the autumn light. When you look upon your journey without the heavy dust of inherited shame, you begin to see that every step you have taken was taken in good faith. The choices that brought you here, the boundaries you maintained, and the quiet courage it took to honor your authentic spirit have not ruined your lineage. They have revealed your deep capacity for honest living, your resilience under pressure, and your quiet ability to stay rooted in your own truth. Allow your physical body to yield even deeper into this sheltered sanctuary tonight. Feel the broad, steady support of the mattress beneath you, holding your shoulders, your spine, your lower back, and your hips in complete unconditional safety. Your lungs move air in a long, peaceful cadence, like the soft, rhythmic rustle of mountain wind passing through wild plum boughs. There is no need to audit your family relationships in the dark. There is no need to prove your loyalty or rewrite your past choices before the sun appears. Time is moving softly, not as a harsh judge measuring your devotion, but as a quiet stream carrying you into deeper restoration. You can let your internal defense drop its sharp arguments completely. You can let your thoughts uncurl softly, like dry leaves drifting across wet peat soil. The dark air surrounding your bed is cool, rustic, and completely undisturbed. It carries no family courtrooms, no bone knives, and no heavy lead harnesses for you to carry before morning arrives. In this quiet sanctuary, you are not a debtor who must pay for their freedom with lifelong self-sacrifice, nor an apprentice who must slice away their own roots. You are simply a living presence, held safely upon a broad, interconnected earth that has sustained wild, authentic growth through unnumbered seasons. Everything that required your rigorous defense today has been set down outside the heavy orchard hut. The lead harness rests forgotten in the mud. The bone knife lies silent in the wooden chest, and the rich mountain earth covers your heart in complete, unshakable ease. Think of how the terraced ridge outside holds its ancient trees in night darkness without argument or fear. The wild trunks do not weep because their branches curve toward their own sky, nor do the deep roots fight the cool autumn rain soaking through the soil. They yield to the natural night with quiet dignity, trusting that the mountain earth beneath them remains deep, strong, and completely unbroken. Your heart possesses that same innate wisdom. It knows how to honor your roots without sacrificing your life. It knows how to love your family while keeping your authentic growth alive inside your chest. You do not need to force your spirit into an inherited mold. You need only to stop fighting the quiet, present soil that holds you right now. Let the soft weight of your head melt deeper into your pillow. Let your neck, your jaw, and the delicate muscles around your throat surrender every remaining trace of strain. Feel how quiet your breath has become, moving like a faint mountain breeze through cold autumn leaves, completely unhurried, peaceful, and smooth. Every inhalation brings cool, clean rest into your frame, and every exhalation releases the lingering urge to fix what is already whole. You are fully permitted to lay down your lead weights. You are allowed to be authentic, to be unbent, and to let your wild rootstock nourish your life in quiet peace while you sleep. As you drift closer to total sleep, feel the quiet comfort of knowing that your true value was never dependent on total parental compliance. Your life is an unfolding, noble tree, sustained by a deep foundation of authentic strength that no silent disappointment can ever destroy. The warmth you have shared, the honesty you have cultivated, and the resilience you have shown are embedded in the very earth of who you are right now. You carry their stability within your spirit, solid, calm, and enduring, like a high mountain terrace that stands firm through every alpine winter. There is no ancestral debt left to calculate, no wild shoot left to carve away, and no family guilt left to resolve in the dark. The tools are still, the trees rest unbent, and the room is wrapped in deep, protective darkness. Let your awareness dissolve softly into the quiet stillness surrounding your bed. Let your body sink through the gentle layers of rest, supported by the broad, steady earth beneath your home, floating down into the deep, dark sanctuary of sleep. You are held, you are safe, and your unbent spirit is completely at peace in the quiet night. The thick timber beams above your head hold the quiet dark with gentle strength, shielding your rest from the cold drizzle that whispers through the high orchard outside. Beneath the solid roof, the air remains soft, rustic, and fragrant with the grounding scent of wet peat, cedar wood smoke, and wild plum bark. Every corner of this quiet space invites your body to step away from the world's expectations, offering an unburdened sanctuary where no life is measured against an inherited frame. You do not need to prove your gratitude to those who raised you, nor do you need to justify your adult path for tomorrow. Simply resting here in the soft dark, feeling the natural rise and fall of your chest, is more than enough to nourish your weary frame. Notice how the soft cadence of your breathing matches the quiet stillness of the root cellar. Inhaling softly brings cool, clean air into your lungs, and exhaling softly settles that air into the deep, grounded foundation of your physical body. With every quiet breath, your limbs grow heavier, your thoughts grow lighter, and the boundary between your awareness and the peaceful darkness around you begins to soften. You are surrounded by a vast protective quiet that holds no fear of human difference and no dread of unlived dreams. Everything is still, everything is resting, and the wide mountain sky above holds your life in complete, effortless safety. Let yourself float softly down into the dark, welcoming soil of deep sleep. Feel your mind letting go of its last guilty thoughts, like dry plum leaves dissolving into warm earth. There are no courtrooms waiting for you in the dark, no family debts to collect, and no filial panics to resolve before dawn arrives. You are resting within your own natural sanctuary, cradled in the deep, enduring peace of your own unbent roots. Sleep arrives naturally now, smooth, soft, and profound, carrying your tired spirit into total rest.